Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and this week my plan is to button up the cab of the Frankenhauler. All right guys, welcome back, and those of you who've been following know that this is the Frankenhauler. It's my 1954 Ford F600 truck cab that I have put onto a Toyota Coaster bus chassis. If you missed last week where I installed the seats, I'll put a link up above so you can catch up, and like always, do the things like subscribe and comment. It all helps that crazy algorithm. So where we left off, I got the seats mounted. I'm very happy with that, and started work on the seat belts, but didn't have enough time to finish. So we need to move on and finish off the brackets for the seat belts, and then I want to try and get the cab off and finish up welding in all of the firewall and patching up all the last little bits and pieces, and just do the last bits that I need to do on the cab before we get to move on to something else and hopefully get it driving and moving and all the rest of it. So I start by removing the seats and then start cleaning up the area for the lower seatbelt mount. Now, some people were concerned about the spreader plates for the seatbelt mounts, and I have factored that in. I am aware of what is required. So the Australian standard asks for a certain thickness of metal at a certain size to act as a spreader plate for seatbelt mounting bolts, and that's what I'm cutting out here, something that complies. They're a nice thick 3mm steel plate, and cleaning it up and mounting my captive nuts to the back of that, and that complies with the Australian standards, so I shouldn't have any dramas there. I may need to go back and add a bit more reinforcing on my upper seatbelt mount, but I'll be discussing that with the engineer in detail and making sure it's everything that he will be happy with. And these lower mounts are actually made much larger to suit the inertia reel and the lower seatbelt mount. And here I weld it all together so I have my captive nuts and spreader plates all mounted securely. I do often find it comical, particularly being a firefighter, when I pull factory cars apart and see how little the seatbelts are actually connected to. It's quite surprising, actually. Alright, so I have my first lower plate in. That's all looking nice, and I welded up the other side with the reinforcing plate and just realised that I lined it up with the bottom edge, not the top edge. So these holes are up near the top edge, and I did it the exact same distance but the wrong way around, and this has got to go on that other side. So I've got to cut this reinforcing plate off and mount it up higher. Thankfully it's not that big a deal to trim off the mounting plate and clean up the back of this piece and remount. Once I've cleaned it all up, I weld it back together, and we are back to where I should have been 10 minutes earlier. Then it's cleaning up the area to fit these lower seatbelt plates and welding them in nice and solidly, really tying them into the cab and that big reinforcing rail across the back. Alright, so we have my seatbelt mounted, and this will do the thing it needs to do. The inertia reel works, and that's all good. The only issue I have is that when I let it go, it's still loose because the length is not quite long enough. And what I'm thinking is I might actually make this lower mount, instead of being sort of right here, I might take this mount off and mount it down here on the floor, because if I take this off, if I put a mount down here on the floor, it takes up most of the slack of the seat belt, and it will be a neater and tidier finish. So I might do a mount now under the floor for the bottom of the seat belt, and just call that a day. So let's drill, make some mounts up, and do it on both sides, and then we can move on. So these are quite simple, just making up a couple of spreader plates that I can then drill out and mount the captive nuts to, and just drill a hole in the floor and mount these under. This is actually the way that the engineers actually like this stuff done. This is how you would mount in racing harnesses and that sort of thing. So we've got some captive nuts here, and these plates make it very simple to just drill a hole in the floor and bolt it through. All right, and we have seatbelt. That works perfectly. Inertia reel works, and it goes back. It's still a little bit loose, like it could be a little bit tighter at the last. It's just because the belt is so long that it sort of is so much longer than I need it. It would fit a very, 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 very large human. So, yeah. Anyway, we have seat belts, and I am quite confident that they are going to work and going to do what they need to do. Let's just check the passenger side. Look at that. All right, so now we have seats and seat belts done. The next thing I want to tackle is doors. We need doors on the truck. Now, I have the original hinges here. They are pretty old. One of them has a broken pin that's stuck in here somewhere, but they're all rusty and old and looking pretty rough. So first things first, let's get them in the blasting cabinet and see if we can tidy them up a bit. This is the ideal sort of parts for the blasting cabinet. They're small enough to fit in there, and I can get in and get a lot of this sort of big heavy surface rust off of them. Nice and easy, and then I've got much cleaner parts to deal with moving forward. And now I am trying to punch out the remains of this broken pin. Alright, so I have gone through, sandblasted all of these hinges and freed them up, and they're actually working now, so they're good. Except for the broken one. And I've tried bashing with a punch to try and get the pin out of the hole, and you can see it there on both sides, but it's not budging. So I think I'm going to have to drill it out. Even either side of the hinge itself, where the pin was, this won't punch out either. This is solid, and I think I'm going to have to grind it and drill them out, so let's do that. These pins did not want to budge, so I put a center punch hole into the end of them and got them in a drill press and started drilling them out. Started with a much smaller size, and I actually tried to use the easy outs that you'd use for bolts, and they didn't want to budge. Even with a hole all the way through the middle, they still wouldn't knock out. I hadn't relieved any of the tension, so I had to just keep enlarging the drill bits until I drilled through the edge of the pin, and then I could knock the rest of it free. And then it's the same issue trying to get the rest of it out of the hinge itself. All right, that stuff was rusted in there hard, and I basically had to drill it out completely until I kept stepping up the drill bits until I just took out the edge of the circle of the pin, and then I managed to get the rest out, and I have the pin out of everywhere, and now what I've got is some, I just happen to have some 5/16 rod, which is the size of the pin that I need. Now, you can buy these pins, but I don't have one, so I'm going to make my own version. Basically, normally these had like a knurled end, a larger knurled end, like a wheel stud that would be sort of hammered in, and that's sort of just a press fit in there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get this on the lathe and put a little groove in the bottom of this and put a circlip on it, and then I might actually weld a nut on the other end so that I actually have a sort of a solid pin with a circlip, and that'll do the job. So let's get on the lathe and make a little circlip groove. So the lathe makes very quick work of putting a little circlip groove onto my pin, and then I cut it to length and start welding on the nut onto the end of it. Put it back on the lathe and turn the nut down to sort of look more like the pins of the other ones. Nice little acorn sort of top on it. And finish it off in the drill on the sanding disc to get a nice neat finish. And there we go. I welded on that nut and ground it down on the lathe and then finished it off on the sanding disc. And yeah, you can see I've got my circlip here and we have a working hinge. So now we have 4 working hinges, we can start looking at mounting some doors. So I bring the doors out of storage and I need to clear off a bunch of the rust initially, and then I'm actually tapping out the original imperial holes to fit metric hardware. There's still plenty of meat on it, so it works quite well. So once the hinges are remounted, then I use the floor jack to help sort of take a lot of the weight of the door so I can line it up and bolt the doors back onto the cab. And then it's time to adjust and keep sort of tweaking the adjustments until I get the door fitting as well as I can get it to fit. Alright, so we now have a door on the truck, but all is not amazing. It doesn't want to close. There's a little bit of binding down in this lower corner down here. This back edge is reasonable down here. It gets quite tight at the top corner here, but loose on this front edge, and then coming down it's really tight here, tight all the way down. There's some buckling in the door here, and most importantly this part of the door is sitting in, this part is sitting out, and that is all of the adjustment there is in the door to get it to where it is. So my first protocol is I can make a shim for the hinge on here to push this out. So right in here where the hinge is, I tapped out the original imperial holes for M8, so they now bolt on nicely, top and bottom, but we need a shim behind this hinge mounting point to get that door out. So let's do that. So I feel like I need a thick spacer, so I've used some really heavy 6mm plate to make my spacer up, using one of the other hinges as a template to get the shape right. Unbolt it, and this is where I realise that things are not really going to work very well. It's quite difficult to get the spacer in there, and it may not actually work the way I would like it to. Alright, so I made up my shim, but then when I tried to install it, these arms go through slots in the door, and it's with the shim it's too wide, it got stuck. I could open up those slots, but I think the better way is to do the old panel beating trick of basically bending and twisting the door until it fits, because that's sort of what you need to do with these old things. And so I'm back to the old method of using a jimmy bar and the weight of the door to help bend things back into place, and also use a big chunk of wood and sort of twist and bash and bend the door until it succumbs to my will. Alright, so with a little bit of manhandling, that is fitting much better. So this line here is quite close all the way down now. The door's a bit mangled down here. It's not perfect, and this edge is not perfect either. There's a little bit of mangling going on along there. This is still sitting out a bit further than I would like, but I still need to add a door latch and have this closed up. I need to put some fair bit of pressure on it at the moment to close that to where it's supposed to be, and then that gets better. Now, again, we're not going for show quality. Externally, this just has to close and be a decent door. But overall, I think that looks good, so I think it means we need to get on and do the other side up to the same point. So, back to refitting the hinges, cleaning out the old doors and tapping the holes for the metric hardware. Mount the door up, and again using the trolley jack to help take the weight, and continue to tweak and adjust until I'm happy with the fitment. This door is a bit more mangled than the other, so it needs a bit of hammer and dolly work to try and get the edge lining up nicely. Alright, so I've been bashing this door up for a while and got the panel gaps reasonable. Now, this is very tight in here, and then it gets wider down the bottom. So this is where I welded on my other panels, and because I didn't do it with the door on, I didn't get it perfect. So this one comes in this way a bit, and this one comes a bit wide, but I do have to replace the bottom of this door anyway, so I think I can repair that when I get around to there. I think I need to tap this. This edge was always bent in, and it does seem like quite a tight fit no matter what. So I'm just going to continue to tweak things and adjust until I get it reasonably close, and then we'll call it passenger door fitted. But I think just morale-wise, I really want to see the front end on the truck with the doors on because, yeah, this is looking a little sad. I think it's always good to give yourself a bit of a morale boost sometimes when you're working away on these things and it seems like it's going on forever. Just putting the front end onto the truck so I can see it all in one piece really lifts the spirits and makes it start looking like a completed vehicle. I don't need the front on the truck right now, but that is some motivation there. It's actually starting to look like what it's going to look like. I'm loving it. It's looking like a truck. We have doors. The front end, it's been raining, so it's all wet, but sometimes you just need these little breaks and this little sort of momentum boost to kick things off again, and I am loving it. So this edge of the door was actually catching and was actually folded over. It obviously was doing it before I even got the truck. So I'm actually knocking back the panel line a bit. I marked it with a ruler, as you could see, to try and keep a nice straight edge, and then hammer and dolly to get just a little bit more panel gap along that side. And it looks like it's actually working quite well. All right, a bit of manipulation, and that is much better. So it's very tight all the way up here, but it fits nicely all the way around, and even down this back edge of the door, it's sitting quite nicely all the way down. So, I mean, it's probably too tight. I'd like to loosen it up a little bit. It actually fits pretty good. I am much happier with that. And now I move on to removing the internals of this old rusty door, which is quite problematic with all the stuck bolts and things like that. And also the fact I don't actually know how this is supposed to go together, so it's a bit of trial and error. There's a bunch of bits that are perished that are just rubbish anyway that have got to go, but there is stuff that I need to keep, so I'm trying to look after as much of it as I can. I've got the window regulator out here and put it straight into the blasting cabinet to try and fix it up and see if I can actually get it working again. Finishing it off with the wire wheel for bits that was quite difficult to get to in the blasting cabinet. Now trying to free it up because a lot of it was seized. So of course I forgot to turn on my microphone again, but you can see here that the window regulator works, but it keeps getting stuck on these dead teeth that have, it was obviously quite seized, and as people have tried to force it, it's folded the teeth over and really sort of mangled it. So now it won't get past that point, but it all seems to work well in the rest of the travel. So I think what I need to do is grind it all down and weld it up and see if I can repair that tooth. So I sat my copper backing pad underneath this so that I could weld against it and build up that tooth again, and then use the angle grinder to trim it back out again. And it was a little bit of backwards and forwards to build it up and basically rebuild that tooth as it was before. And as you can see, it turned out great. It's almost indistinguishable from the others where it's actually been repaired. And the regulator now winds up and down nice and freely and works the way it's supposed to, so that's saved me from going to buy a new one. It's good to keep these things running if we can. The original stuff's always better than the reproduction. Alright, so the doors are on the truck and I've got them stripped out. Now my next challenge is, this is the original door lock mechanism for the truck. These are pretty much junk. They're not a very good door latch, and yeah, I'm not sort of comfortable leaving these on the truck. I think they need to be upgraded. What I have is the Toyota door locks off of the Coaster bus. They've been using these for a long time now. They still use the basically exact same design today. And what I want to do is I want to fit this to the door, not with this door handle. I want to continue to use the old Ford door handle and make it still feel like it's still the old Ford, but the door actually locks and latches properly. It's got the sort of the two-stage safety catch and all the rest of it. So we have the safety, we have proper locks that work, and the whole thing is going to be much better if I can just swap in these. Now, I've been having a look at the way that the mechanisms work. One of them is obviously the lock, to lock and unlock the door, and then the other one is to actually open the door. And there's obviously the internal door and the external as well. Now, the external is going to be a little bit more of a challenge. So the original door handle, when you push the button on the outside, it just pushed a rod through, and that rod pushed on this lever to open and close the door. What I need to do is I need to transfer that force from being a straight force to a downward force, because that's what the external lever in the Toyota latch needs. My plan is to make up a simple bell crank that will convert this force. This will press into an arm, and that arm will just pivot a lever that pushes this arm down. It all makes sense when I put it all together, but for starters, I think I need to work out a place to mount this latch into the door frame, and then work out where the corresponding place for the striker needs to go onto the body of the truck. So let's do that. So I start with a basic mock-up. I put the striker onto the door just loosely, roughly where I think it needs to go. Mark on the inside of the door where the internal latch needs to be, and then I can start cutting out a slot for that to poke through. Put the latch on the inside, mark out where the screws need to go, and make my holes for the screws and screw it into the door. That's the easy bit. Then I need to make sure I've got enough spacing for the striker and the latch to work together, and then of course I close it and it all gets stuck and I can't undo it, so I had to actually unbolt the striker from inside and then play around with it, and eventually I got the striker back out again, and I realised I need a bigger spacer plate for the striker so that it all works correctly. Alright, so I had to mount the striker. I just quickly made up a spacer. This is a 6mm spacer. I think I'm going to actually make weld a new plate sitting slightly forward in this recess here, but this is the Toyota striker, and I trimmed out and mounted in the Toyota latch, and that is sitting in there quite nicely. And if I close it, we have a nicely closing door. It is nice and solid, and yeah, I can just reach in and trigger it at the moment. I still need to make some way of actually being able to trigger that and get it so that it will open the door, but we are making progress. And now we move back over to the passenger side and start stripping this door down. Like I mentioned previously, this door seems to be in a little bit worse shape than the driver's door. Neither of them are perfect, but this one was a bit worse, and there were a lot more seized nuts and bolts on this. And I had to drill and cut a lot of nuts and bolts out to get the pieces disconnected. All right, that was messy work, but we have the passenger door completely stripped down. It's just so hard working with that old rusty mess. Flathead screws are the bane of my existence with this. As many of you know, old rusted flathead screws, and the amount of things I had to like drill out. And we got there. I have the door stripped down, and we have the lock obviously in the driver's door, and it works nicely. That is perfect. Nice panel gaps, nicely closes. So we're part way there. but I'm out of time this week. I'm not going to be able to finish off the other side. So, as always, I think that means it's time for Fun Facts with Mrs. Jeff.
Hey guys, during World War II, Ford turned to manufacturing not only Jeeps, but it was also enlisted to build aircraft. Now, Henry Ford owned an enormous farm at Willow Run in Michigan, and in 1941 he put some of that farmland to good use when he established a production plant on the land. This building was enormous, being about 1 kilometre long and about 390 metres wide. With an area of 330,000 square metres, or around 3.5 million square feet, it was thought to be the largest factory under one roof in the world. The 42,500 employees then got to work building B-24 Liberator heavy bombers for the war effort. So from 1942 until 1945, there were over 8,000 B-24s built at Willow Run, and these bombers were used all over the world for the war effort. These were used extensively not only by the US, but also by the British, the South Africans, and of course the Royal Australian Air Force. In fact, a total of 287 B-24s were supplied to Australia. In 1944, Qantas began using the first of 2 converted B-24s to fly from Perth to Colombo. So that route was named the Kangaroo Service and was the first time that Qantas used the kangaroo logo.
All right, and we have doors on the truck. And we have one that actually latches and closes. The other one, I'll get to it next time. But that's so much work getting the seat belts in and getting all these things, these sort of final little bits buttoned up so that the cab is sort of complete and whole. I was hoping I'd get it all finished, but yeah, we still got more. We're getting there.
Always a little bit more. Like and subscribe, let Jeff know what you think about the videos, comments, he loves reading your comments, and of course Patreon, if you want to help him out in his crazy builds, much appreciated. And see the videos day early from no ads. Is that going to stay that big, that mirror thing?
That mirror is actually, I've found surprisingly terrible because
I haven't seen this for a while, for a couple of days, so it's new to me.
I was sitting in the seat. Instead of looking at a 45 degree like you would normally look for a mirror, it's all the way around at 90. So you have to turn your head completely sideways to see the mirror to see what's behind. So no, I think I'm going to have to change the mirror up a little.
Because otherwise you might as well just hang your head out the window.
It's not quite working the way it should.
I think it looks funky. Anyway.
Okay.
All right. Bye, guys.
See you guys.
Hey, guys. During World War II, Ford turned...
Just read what it says.
Shut up. Hey, guys. During World War II, Ford turned to... I'm very tired. Turned to manufacturing. Hey, guys. During World War II, Ford... building B-24 heavy bomb liberators for the war effort. Then got to work building B-24 Liberators.
Liberator heavy bombers.
Liberator heavy bombers. But also by the South Africans, the English. And that route became known as the Kangaroo Service pad.
What?
And, not pad. But look how that looks like pad.